Celia Keenan-Bolger is one of Broadway's brightest stars, most recently winning a Tony for her work in To Kill a Mockingbird. And now she's dishing with fellow artists to serve up Sunday Pancakes, her new podcast. Hi, Celia. How are you considering
Hi-
everything going on in the world right now?
Today I would say is a good day. I feel like the weather is nice. I feel like a lot of people I know are getting vaccinated, which is making me feel really hopeful. So I would say, as far as COVID, I'm like COVID good.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it good to feel this way, though? And what a difference does the weather in our area make?
I hate to be that person, but it really does. I feel like just those daffodils coming up, all these things that I think pre-pandemic, it wasn't that I took them for granted, but I do feel like those shifts, those external shifts have become so much more meaningful than they were maybe a year ago.
Yeah. I don't know how the people in Seattle made it. I don't know how they made it. I don't know.
No, me neither.
I know.
Hard.
Well, one of my favorite things is listening to podcasts. And so I was excited to do this story. Tell us a little bit about the podcast and what sparked the idea for you to do this.
I also have been listening to so many podcasts, and I have found them to be like a lifeline in this past year. They have been so helpful to me, both in consuming information, but also from a sort of shared experience, mental health place. And I heard a podcast actually really early on in the pandemic where George Saunders, the author, was talking about how it is the artist's job during times of great challenge, not necessarily to process what's going on, but to try to keep a record of what happened. And I thought that seems manageable. Trying to process what we've just been through, that does not seem manageable. But I thought, I have found so much solace in listening to other people's podcasts. And I know so many people in the theater community who are so amazing. And I was like, what would it be like just to sit down with them and ask them to keep a record, to say, how have you been doing? What have you been doing during this time when we've been faced with 100% unemployment? What does it look like? What does your life look like? And so I've been able to sit down with these artists that I love and I respect. And it's been sort of the conversations have been less about, our creative processes or things like that, and more about what it means to be an artist when you don't have anything to show up to. And it's just, I've found the conversation so helpful and inspiring and interesting. So that was sort of where it all began.
You say the word conversation, it feels like that, right? It's less of a podcast and more of just people come together and just having a conversation. It just feels that way.
Yes. And I feel like when I was listening to other podcasts, I felt like I was a part of a community a little bit, like I felt connection in a way that I also feel like we were all so starved for. And feeling a part of something, I think, was also, as an actor, it's one thing because you get to do this job that I love so much, but it's also that you get to connect with all of these amazing people. And so I felt like I had a double punch where I was like, I don't get to work and I don't get to connect. So I can at least try to take one of these things into my own hands and try to connect with other people and hopefully make the listeners and the audience also feel connected.
I love that. And, I talk to so many people who ask me for advice on, I want to start a podcast. What do I want to do? One of the biggest hurdles for them is when it comes to getting started is coming up with a name. Sunday Pancakes. Where did it come from?
I think it again comes from that place of like missing gatherings. And I was like, I cannot wait to just sit around a table, have some food and with other people, and just where time is no issue, just get to talk and talk and talk. So that was one component of it. The other part was that on Instagram, I was following this amazing author, Mary H.K. Choi, and she had talked about how she and her friends would do something. They would have like little thought pancakes where they would be thinking about something and they would send a voice memo to each other. And it wasn't like a well-formed thought. It was kind of messy, like that first pancake always is. And I was like, I think that is such an amazing idea. And I started on my own Instagram, just as things would come up. I would say, I'm thinking about jealousy in our industry, or I'm thinking about feelings of self-worth, or I'm thinking, and they weren't very well thought out, but they were just things that I would put out there. And the response, I was so moved by how many people were like, I have also been thinking about this. I am also struggling with this. And I thought, combined with this thing that I've already sort of on my social media put out there about these little thought pancakes, paired with the fact that I'm still hungry to gather with other people, it just seemed like, and we were like, what day are we going to put this podcast out? And I was like, well, Sunday pancakes seems like not a terrible idea. So there we are.
I love when it just happens that way, right? When it's just organic and it just fits with, just, you don't have to overthink it. It just fits with your life and where you are and the purpose of what it is. I have to ask you though, for folks who are out there thinking about starting a podcast and all that, like, how easy or difficult was it for you to get started? Talk about, the music, the setting, the web, like all the behind, where you were going to do it, the equipment. Tell me about getting started.
I mean, this is what I'm going to tell you is that I knew I had to find a producer, because I was like, I am not a DIY, like I'm going to figure out how to edit and record and what equipment I need. I mean, I was like, let me just do a little internet search. And I was like, no, this is not for me. I have to find someone else to support me in this endeavor. And luckily, Playbill, which is a very famous Broadway website and corporation, was looking for a podcast. But I will say, I have learned, you hear a lot about making new, what do they call it? Brain plasticity, or like the growth mindset of doing something that you haven't done before. And even with the support that I have of a producer, I have found myself feeling just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm doing this. And the truth is, once you just take that leap, you can figure it out. And I think there are a lot of amazing platforms where we use Soundtrap, which is an amazing recording website that you could just go to, download it right there and put it up on the web. And I think the more important thing is just taking those first steps. It's so easy, I think, to convince yourself of all the reasons that there are 20 other people that would be better podcasters who know more about technology than you do. And it's really just about trying to make yourself just do it instead of think about it.
Yeah. You hear that, Lisa? My producer on here, who is a Broadway aficionado. She knows all things Broadway. And she should definitely do her own podcast on all things Broadway.
Yes, Lisa. Yes.
So let me ask you about these fabulous guests. Not only do we get you, but also Philippa Sue, Kelly O'Hara, all your fabulous, famous friends. What's it like connecting specifically with those folks? I mean, do you know them already? Are you learning more about them than you already knew through these conversations?
I mean, it's a little bit of a combo. I have a personal relationship with almost everybody that I'm talking to, just because I've been in the business for like 20 years. So at this point, I'm like, I know a lot of people. But I will say the most recent episode that I did with Kelly O'Hara, we worked together right out of college on a job where we developed a project for 2 years. And then I was told I would not be continuing with the project and that she would be the person taking over the role. Wow. And we remained friends, but it was always one of those things, I think, for both of us, it was a real moment in both of our careers. And we ended up having the most healing, it's going to make me cry just talking about it. It was an amazing conversation that in some ways, both of us were like, I can't believe that we're having this conversation on a podcast. But since it's come out, the number of people who have reached out to me to say, how helpful and what it meant to watch two women navigate a very difficult conversation, how much that meant to them. It went back to the thing that we were just talking about building community, and how, for whatever reason, podcasts they draw you in, I think, in a different way. And both of us felt vulnerable enough, and we felt like the setting was intimate enough that we could actually go there. And then I think for the people who have been listening, they just really found it to be a very different kind of conversation than what you usually get to hear. So that's one that that she's somebody I've loved for a very long time, but this podcast, this conversation was like, it was a life-changing conversation, I think, for both of us.
Girl, you might have to change this to Super Soul Sunday Pancakes.
I can't tread on that. I can't step on that. She knows too much. Too much.
Oh my goodness. That's so powerful though. It really is. And the fact that by you just having these conversations that you not only, entertain people, but also help people. That's gotta feel good.
Oh my gosh. I mean, especially to think about like what is the artist's job right now? I think a lot of us have been struggling with that, like that we all feel so lucky to be able to do this thing that we love, but it does feel like in this moment, artists have a particular space in our culture, and particularly thinking about how fractured we are and how divided we are. It feels like the arts are one of the only ways that we can change hearts and minds, that we can show characters that we don't necessarily agree with. And it doesn't mean that I don't know that it will even change our minds, but that it will at least make us more empathetic. It will give us understanding. And I think in a tiny way, I suppose I'm trying to do that with this podcast, to just open up a space that we've all been holding on to and been feeling a lot of grief and sadness around, to try to say, like, whatever grief and sadness you are holding, these famous Broadway stars are also holding it. And so that creates a place where we're building community instead of feeling a little bit less alone.
Oof, I'm gonna get me some chai tea in a minute. This is powerful. I love it. All right, let's talk a little bit about Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
It's in uncharted territory, more than a year into the shutdown. How are you feeling about the future of your industry? I know in the beginning of this conversation, you talked about feeling hopeful, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
people are getting their vaccinations, things are turning. How do you think Broadway will recover from all of this?
I mean, I believe, again, going back to the culture, that I believe that people are going to be hungry for live theater. And I cannot wait to be back in a theater watching a Broadway show or on a Broadway stage. I do think there are systems that were in place, particularly around racial justice in our community, that we had not necessarily faced, that I'm very eager to get back to, and to see how we all show up. I think Broadway always, to me, felt like a space. And I suppose I think about this in terms of audiences as well, because whenever I have been on Broadway, the audience was, probably 90% white, that a lot of the spaces that I have felt like so comfortable and so included in, since George Floyd was murdered, I feel like our community has had to face the ways that we also have some real blind spots in our industry. And I'm so eager to get back in those rehearsal rooms. And I think a lot of us have been doing a lot of work on ourselves and thinking about our community and the systems that we've been upholding that were not always just, and to see how we can show up in a different way that will make this place that I have always felt was one of the most inclusive and welcoming communities that way for all the people who are a part of it, both the actors and also, with all of this virtual theater that's been happening. I think we've been able to have accessibility to people who couldn't necessarily afford Broadway before, people who were disabled and who weren't able to get to the theater before. And so I think, we're in a real moment of change that is both a little overwhelming and also very inspiring to me, and that I don't think would have ever come about if we hadn't all had to take this year to really reflect on this industry that we're a part of and that I think we care about so deeply. Yeah. That was a long, big answer. I don't know.
But it was a great answer. I mean, because really, just as a Black woman who works in entertainment, not in theater specifically, but just, as a journalist, it is, Black people are exhausted.
Yes.
So it's nice to hear, white people say, this is important. we have to, you know what I mean? Let's continue it. Let's pick up, let's go. Let's make some change. This is what I see when I look out in this audience. And that's not right, because we've been seeing it forever. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And so now it's like, it's nice that I didn't even ask you about that, but that was something that was on your heart and that's important to you. That encourages me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because that's where allyship begins. You know what I mean? That's where it begins, where it's present on your mind, where you're like, this ain't right.
Yeah. And I think, especially when you're part of a community that prides itself on being so forward thinking and being so empathetic, and to then realize, oh, we have had all of these blind spots, that I'm like, oh, we have the work to do. And I think I probably bring it up because I believe that this community is up for it, that we can do the work. We can do the work better than maybe some corporate structures or, whoever else, but that we are designed for this kind of work. And I'm really hopeful. And I have, again, like, yeah, I do feel hopeful about where we can go with these next steps of the Broadway community.
Yeah, you and me both. I'm really excited about that. Okay, so I got to ask you about this TV project you have coming up, because I am like, this cast, lady, the Gilded Age. I mean,
yes.
Come on. Is there a record for the number of Tony nominees and Tony winners that are on one project?
I'm so grateful to HBO that they were like, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to make a space for a lot of theater actors to come and be on this amazing show. I just was shooting there for 3 weeks in Rhode Island. We're shooting in Newport. And, I've been on a lot of television sets before, and I always felt a little bit like I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll just, show up and do my job. And we got on this set, and it was all these theater actors, and our directors, Sally and Michael, were so invested in creating what to me felt like a rehearsal, like theater rehearsal, where we sat around the table and were able to be with one another. And I am so excited for the world to see this show. I'm mostly because I had such an amazing time working on it, which, is not always the case, but it was really, I think, the caliber of talent on the show. I think the writing, I think the opulence and beauty and escapism that people are going to get to experience in the show is just something that will be a nice breath of fresh air right now.
I love that. Can you drop some of the names of who else?
Sure. Oh, I would be so happy to. Well, we have Christine Baranski and Cynthia Nixon in one house, and then we have Carrie Coon and Morgan Spector in another house. We have Kelly O'Hara and Michael Cerveris and Audra McDonald, the great Danae Benton, who I feel like people are about to really discover, Louisa Jacobson, Katie Finneran. It's just like a lot of people who I really respect, and who I think in some ways, the television audiences, they know some of these people, but there are going to be a whole bunch of people that they're like, where did this person come from? And we're going to be like, that person has been on Broadway for 20 years. And now you get to know them too. So
Right. I love that. I cannot wait for this project to come out. Let me take you back to the Broadway stage for a moment. What is it going to be like for you when you put your foot back on like a Broadway stage? I
feel like there are going to be two parts. There'll be like that day when you come to the stage and it's just the cast, and then everybody's just going to be crying and hugging and saying how grateful we are to be back. But then the idea of being in front of an audience, I can't even. I feel like I'm going to have to take some sort of medication so that I won't just cry through the show. I think that experience, it's what makes the theater so special, is that shared experience of the audience and the actors, and the idea of getting to be back with New York audiences. It's so moving to me. I can't even quite wrap my head around what that will feel like.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
The first Kurt, I can't even imagine what it would feel like for you.
Also, I can't wait to be in the audience. I feel like I'm going to be as excited to be in the audience, just for my friends and all of that. Like that part also feels really exciting.
Yeah, I would think it's just like all of you all coming back to work. It's going to be like that opening of Mary Tyler Moore with the,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just like, it's going to be like this moment.
Yes, that is exactly right. That's exactly right.
All
Mhm.
right. Well, let me let everybody know that Sunday Pancakes is available now on all podcast platforms and on playbill.com. Celia, such a pleasure. Congrats on everything. So lovely talking to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate talking to you.
All right. Be well.
You too.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.